it's Megan, and today I'm going to be doing another true crime video. So today's case is an old one. It's actually from Spain. As far as I can tell, it is the first ever recorded serial killer in Spain. And it's not for the faint-hearted, so if true crime or murder or anything in that field makes you feel uncomfortable, please do click off the video now. So the case today is about Manuel Blanco Romasanta. Now, he was also known as the Werewolf of Allariz, or the Tallow Man. Now, because I have no shame, I'm going to admit that I didn't know what tallow meant or what it was, and it is extracted fat. You'll understand why as I get into the case. Manuel Blanco Romasanta was born on the 18th of November 1809 in the Allariz province of Spain. His parents were Maria Romasanta and Miguel Blanco. Manuel was born with birth defects, and his birth just generally was quite a difficult one. Whenever he was first born, the doctors couldn't actually tell because of physical birth defects whether he was male or female. So for the first 6 years of Manuel's life, he was actually raised as Manuela. He was raised as a girl, he dressed as a girl, he had long hair, and he didn't know any different. By the age of 6, the doctors actually then discovered that Manuela was actually Manuel and that he was a boy. So from then on, he then started to live as a boy, and his life drastically changed. His name legally wasn't actually changed from Manuela to Manuel until he was 8 years old. So you can only imagine the confusion that he would have been feeling throughout the time. So because Manuel was quite well educated, it seemed that he could read and write. It was believed that his parents were quite wealthy. As he grew into an adult, Manuel was actually quite small in stature. He was believed to have been between 4'6" and 4'11". He had blonde hair, although all of the pictures online and the drawings online they show a man with dark hair. And throughout his life he was perceived to have been tender looking. He's also described later on as effeminate. So obviously because he had grown up as a female for so long, those behaviours and those characteristics are part of who he was. When Manuel was around 22 to 23 years old, he actually married a young lady, and he was working as a tailor at the time, or a dressmaker he was also referred to as. And a year after their marriage, his wife sadly passed away. Whenever she did pass away, he then went on and started to work as a travelling salesman. He also would have acted as a guide for people who were travelling through that part of Spain. He would have been kind of like a tour guide for any of the travellers. In 1844, a police constable from Leon named Vincent Ferrantes had actually attempted to retrieve a debt from Manuel. This was a debt of 600 reals, and Manuel had was in absentia. This actually then meant that Manuel was then on the run. Manuel then went on for the next year to live in hiding in a place called Amida. The year after that, he had obtained a false passport under the name of Antonio Gomez, I think. Antonio Gomez, who was actually a native of Portugal, and he went on then for the next year to live under the name Antonio Gomez. Manuel then moved to a small village in the district of Villa de Barrio. During this time he worked in a number of different jobs. He worked as a cook and as a yarn weaver on a spinning wheel, and throughout his time in this village, all of the men actually would have described him as being effeminate, because he had made such good friendships with the females of the village. So over the next few years, Manuel had actually persuaded a number of different women and children to let him be their tour guide while they were travelling through Spain. A lot of these women and children actually started to vanish, and people started to notice that they were vanishing, and they started to notice that whenever he was doing his work as a travelling salesman, he was selling a lot of the items that belonged to these women and children. All of the families of the people who had gone missing had actually received letters from Manuel to say that they had arrived safely and that they were settling in, and basically that everything was fine. Later on, a rumour actually started to spread that Blanco was selling soap that was made from human fat. People of the city of Escalona actually made a complaint about Manuel in 1852, and this was to say that he had been persuading these women and children to travel with him, and that he'd been killing them so that he could extract their fat in order to make soap and sell it. In September 1852, Manuel was arrested and taken to Allariz, which is in the province of Orense, where he was born. During his trial, he actually admitted to 13 of the murders. His defence was a very strange one. He actually claimed that none of this was his fault. None of these murders were his fault because he was afflicted with a curse, and this curse caused him to turn into a werewolf. Now, I have a little quote here from his trial, which I am going to read out to you. So, the first time I transformed was in the mountains of Crusoe. I came across two ferocious looking wolves. I suddenly fell to the floor and began to feel convulsions. I rolled over 3 times, and a few seconds later, I myself was a wolf. I was out marauding with the other 2 for 5 days until I returned to my own body. The one you see before you today, Your Honour. The other 2 wolves came with me, who I thought were also wolves changed into human form. They were from Valencia. One was called Antonio and the other Don Gennaro. They too were cursed. We attacked and ate a number of people because we were hungry. So, the prosecutor during this trial was a man named Luciano Bastido Hernandez. He asked Manuel during the trial to prove that he was cursed with this, being a werewolf, and asked him to turn. So Manuel actually claimed that this curse only lasts for 13 years, and the 13 years had ended a week prior to his trial. So, for 4 of the victims that he was being charged was Manuela Garcia, aged 47, her daughter Petra, 15. They were killed in Sierra de San Mamede while travelling to Santander. Benita Garcia Blanco, aged 34, and her son Francisco, 10, killed in Corgo de Boy while travelling to Rua Cantabras. Antonio Land, 37 years old, and her daughter Peregrina, killed while travelling to Orense. Josefa Garcia and her son Jose Pazos, 21 years old. Maria Dolores, 12 years old. So on April 6th of 1853, Manuel was sentenced to death by garrote. He was also required to pay a fine of 1,000 real per victim. After being considered by the territorial court, his sentence was actually then reduced to life imprisonment. This was 7 months after the initial trial. This decision was appealed by the prosecution, and a new hearing was arranged in March of 1854. The original verdict of death by garrote was then upheld. The prosecutor in this case, Hernandez, actually received a civil award and a knighthood by Charles III of Spain. This was for his work on this case. Now, Manuel was not executed. It was personally commuted by Queen Isabella II to life in prison. This was on the 13th of May 1854. The reason for this was that a man named Mr. Phillips, who was a French hypnotist, had contacted the Spanish Minister of Justice. He had claimed that Manuel was suffering from a monomania, which is an obsessive enthusiasm called lycanthropy, and that he had previously treated this lycanthropy in another patient of his, and that he wanted to run some tests and study Manuel. Mr. Phillips never actually studied Manuel, and there's no evidence to show who Mr. Phillips actually is. It's believed that he may have been a French physician who was actually exiled to, I think it was England, and that he had returned to France under a different name, which was Mr. Phillips, which isn't really a very French name. There is no actual, there are no files and no records of the prison that Manuel was in, but it's believed that he was actually moved to a prison in Calanova, and a few months after he had been moved, he actually passed away. Now, there was rumours as well that he had been shot by a guard who had asked him to turn into a werewolf, and when he didn't, he shot him. But later on, many years later on, in 2011 actually, researchers had actually had an exhibition about this man, and they had somehow discovered that he had actually died on the 21st of December 1863, and this was from stomach cancer. So, because of the age of this case, there's not really any way of knowing for definite what happened or how he died, as well as that, because of the time, even if there was a death record, it's always possible that if he had been shot by a guard, it could have been covered up. But I just found this case so interesting. I had remembered a film that I had watched years ago, and I don't really remember it being a very great film, to be fair. I think Dustin Hoffman might have been in it, but it was called weeks ago just to kind of see, was it based on a true story. I found this, I just came across this. I think it wasn't actually based on a true story, but it was kind of somewhat based around this, although the film was set in France. But I came across this and I started reading it. I just found it really interesting because I don't know about Spain or their systems or anything, but I would imagine anyone in the likes of the UK or Ireland who claimed that they had murdered because of an affliction such as a werewolf curse, that they may end up in the likes of Broadmoor, or I don't know. Yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this. It was a bit of a short case, but if you have any suggestions or anything similar that you would like to hear about, please do let me know. I am currently in the process of researching a couple more true crime cases, and I'm hoping to have a more regular kind of flow of uploads. But yeah, anything that you want to see, please do let me know. Even if there are any trigger videos that you would like to see, please let me know. And again, I am so grateful for all of the support so far. I was kind of expecting that no one would be watching these videos. I just didn't expect